Welcome makers, I'm excited to share this Teunga Taolunga costume. This is one of my favorite things I've created. My good friends asked me to make this for their daughter. They definitely gave me a challenge with the request for a baby blue costume. Baby blue is a difficult color to find and also match shades with, so I decided to do a monochromatic costume using shades of light blue, dusty blue, and baby blue. We're going to start off by making our kie for the costume. I'm using 2 types of macrame cord to achieve the look that I want. As always, I will link the materials I used in the description box and on my Amazon storefront. The first macrame cord I'm using is a Bonnie macrame cord in baby blue. This cord is something I use frequently in costume inlays. Usually I use black and brown. I'm going to use this cord to create my half circle shapes that would traditionally be made from kapa. Each of my half circles will be formed from 3 pieces of cord. The length of each cord will be determined by the size of the shells you're using and the size of the person wearing it. Because this costume is for a younger girl, I'm considering her proportion as I determine the size. I cut some different sizes and laid it out with my shells to determine the length of the 3 cords. To create the layered effect in the half circle shape, your 3 cord lengths will be different. After determining the size, I'm going to cut out all of my pieces of cord and burn the ends to prevent fraying. As you determine the length of your cords, you will want to add about 1 inch of length to each cord that will be needed to sew the half circle to the base of the kie. After cutting all of my macrame cord, I'm going to wrap each cord in a thinner macrame cord to better represent what the kie might look like when made with kapa. I'm using dabs of E6000 glue as I wrap to help keep my cord in place. When I get to the end of my piece of cord, I'm using super glue to hold it in place and prevent fraying. I shared this in my last video, but I think it's worth sharing again. My intention in sharing this type of tutorial is not to modernize traditional Tongan attire, but to take a lesson in resourcefulness from those who came before us and create something beautiful that respects the Tongan culture but is made from materials that are readily available to us. This tutorial does not use traditional mechanics because I'm adapting to the materials that are available to me. To create a sort of belt to attach my half circle shape, I'm cutting a waistband from felt. I needed to use 2 pieces to get my desired length, so I sewed those together in the middle. Next, I sewed a piece of macrame cord down the length of the felt, leaving 5 to 6 inches on each side, which will be used to tie on the kie. Now I'm going to sew on my individually wrapped macrame cords. Using embroidery floss, I am hand sewing one end of my 3 cords onto the felt waistband. Then I'm forming my desired round shape and sewing the other 3 ends of my cord. This will be the back of my waistband. On the front of my waistband, I'm gluing down rows of macrame cord to cover my felt. I'm using the E6000 glue again and using clips to hold the macrame cord in place while it dries. Ideally, I would sew this cord to the waistband, but my sewing machine is pretty basic and I would need a more industrial machine to sew through all the layers. This costume will feature a clay Heilala kahoa, so I'm incorporating a few Heilala flowers onto my kieke and sewing them onto the waistband. I ordered my shells from Amazon. I'm using cowrie shells that are often used in Taulunga costumes. I've ordered from a few different companies on Amazon, and I will link those in my storefront. These vary in size, but the ones I'm using range from 2 to 3 inches. To be able to attach the shells to the kieke, I need to drill holes into the shells. There are more industrial tools that would be easier to use, but I don't have access to any of those, so I'm using a handheld drill from Amazon. I used 2 different sizes of drill bits, and I did need to order replacement drill bits to be able to get through all of my shells. I drilled 1 hole on each side of the shell. This does take a little practice, but you will get a feel for the angle and pressure you need to use to get through the shell. I'm using my larger drill bit to create a hole. I don't want to try to drill through the parts of the shell that are really thick. Once I've created the hole, I'm going to use my smaller, sharper drill bit to drill all the way through. The hole needs to be large enough that your needle can fit through it. To sew on the shells, I'm using a needle and embroidery floss. I'm going through each hole twice and securing the back with a knot. For the base of my teunga, I'm using a thick piece of velvet cloth. I sewed bias tape around the edges and added my baby blue macrame cord on top of that. On the bottom of the costume, I glued on flat back baby blue pearls using gem tack glue. I did not add the pearls to the full width of my piece of cloth because the back part of it will be overlapped and will not show. At the top of the teunga, I'm using the gem tack glue to add blue shell chips. The ones I used are no longer available, but I will link some similar ones on Amazon. Next, I'm working on a clay Heilala kahoa for the costume. I'm not going to go into too much detail. I do have another tutorial I'm working on for this, but I will link the clay cutters and sizes that I ordered from Etsy. For a child's Heilala, I tend to use the 12 millimeter size flower, and for an adult Heilala, I use 16 millimeters. I'm starting the process by conditioning and rolling out my clay. Usually you create the hole to sew the flower in the back, going across the flower. I use this method as well, but for this costume, I made the hole in the center of the flower and used a seed bead to sew on the flower. I'll choose to do this for 2 reasons. Number 1, it saves time, and if I feel like the style will look better with a bead in the center. For this particular costume, I chose to do a baby blue bead to go along with my monochromatic look, and because I felt like it matched the style well with the blue pearls and shells that I used. To sew on my Heilala flowers, I'm using the same method as my tutorial using plastic flower beads, and I will link that in the description. I'm also going to link the YouTube tutorial made by Heilala Creations. Her work is beautiful, and she's an expert on Heilala kahoas. The last steps of my costume are to make my tekiteki and vesas. I kept the design simple by gluing small shells to some baby blue ribbon. Unfortunately, as I was finishing this costume at 4 a.m, I forgot to film making the tekiteki, so I will do a separate tutorial and link that in the description box. One of the things I enjoyed about making this Teunga Taulunga is that I was trusted with creative freedom. The only request that I was given was the color. I feel like creative freedom is the best kind of motivation. When you're trusted to imagine, experiment, adapt, and push boundaries, that's when I feel like I can create my best work. This is the beautiful Mele Lilo wearing her costume in Fiji for her aunt's wedding. Thanks for watching.